GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask. So why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very good morning and welcome to the briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey. Well, in just a couple of moments, we're going to be live in the House of Commons for Prime Minister's Question Time. And we've got a fantastic panel of politicians to discuss what's coming up and to give their post-match analysis afterwards as well. And as always, we want to hear your view on PMQs. Who do you think won? What would you like to see? Send us your questions and your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Very good afternoon, well, almost afternoon on this Wednesday, and welcome to the programme. Yeah, it is, 9 minutes to 12. We'll be in the Commons, of course, bang on midday as PMQs is about to get underway. But first, let's bring in my fantastic panel. We've got the Shadow Minister for Levelling Up, Alex Norris, and Kevin Hollinrake, who's the Conservative MP for Thirst and Bolton. Very good afternoon to both of you, gentlemen. Alex, let's start with you. I mean, if you were in Sir Keir's shoes this morning, what would you be wanting to ask the Prime Minister?
Well, there's a lot to go at, Darren, but I would say that I think we can expect to see lots about the cost of living crisis, because that's what people are really feeling in their daily lives at the moment. I think they'd expect to see that. Perhaps something on NHS waiting lists, which is a big story of this week, and I think we may challenge the ridiculous things said last week when the Prime Minister said crime was going down, when of course it's going up. It's only going down if you take out fraud, which I don't think you can do that. So I think we'll see some of those.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That there's Wales questions happening right now in the Commons. Interesting, isn't it? I saw Emily Thornberry tweet out today, Kevin, that there are two things that she wants the Prime Minister to correct the record on, which is that falling crime statistic and also that employment is higher than it was pre-COVID, which, according to the ONS, it is not. Any chance the Prime Minister's going to do that?
Probably not.
Let's be frank and honest about it.
I mean, the crime thing's an interesting one, because I think, I wouldn't like to speak for the Prime Minister or any of his cabinet ministers, but I think it's good to see things like burglaries going down, street crime going down. I think that's the wider point. Fraud is a massive issue, something I work very hard on in Parliament.
I mean, it was slightly ridiculous of Kwasi Kwarteng on Sunday to suggest that this is not really a crime that concern people, given the fact that people, obviously, with online crime, get ripped off every day.
Definitely, and we need to do lots more about it. The online safety bill should include paid-for advertising in its. It should encompass that in legislation to make it a requirement for things like Google and Facebook to check the advertisers, make sure they're bona fide. We've been campaigning very hard on that. It's a cross-party issue. There's a lot more collaboration in Parliament than you might see at PMQs in a few minutes' time, but generally there's a good consensus that we should tighten up the rules, basically.
In saying that, Alex, there's been a sense, I think, in recent weeks that kind of Partygate, in terms of the Keir Starmer trying to score political points, at least in the rough and tumble of politics, has ebbed away. Is that your sense?
I don't think scoring political points is a fair characterisation. It is really important, given the nature of the rules that we've been living under for the last couple of years. It seems the Prime Minister wasn't following them. I think it's legitimate and important that the Leader of the Opposition would probe that, and Prime Minister's questions is the moment to do so. Obviously, there's less of that whilst we now wait for the police and then the finishing of Sue Gray's investigation, which will, I think, perhaps wake it all up again. But as I say, I would expect that people would think that cost of living and the fears they've got in their daily lives at the moment are what they will see reflected in this important political moment.
I mean, the fallout from this continues. I suspect we're not going to get Keir Starmer asking this directly, but I suspect we'll get Labour backbenchers on what we saw on Monday and the Prime Minister's words around that. And today, Kevin, we also had John Armitage, who is a major donor. I think he's given more than £3 million over the years to the Conservative Party, saying, that Boris needs to go. He's done damage and his premiership is beyond the point of no return.
Well, on Monday's issue, but those people have been outside Parliament for ages, campaigning against all kinds of things. They weren't there just because of the Jimmy Savile thing. In fact, I think they said today on record that it wasn't the Prime Minister's comments that led to their words and actions against Keir Starmer, which were totally inappropriate. In terms of an individual donor, well, that's up to a donor to make that decision. My experience in Thurso Moulton, when I'm walking the streets, talking to everyday people, is they have a lot of confidence in the Prime Minister, don't think he should resign over eating some birthday cake or maybe having a glass of wine in his garden. It may be worse. It may be worse, and we I was good to hear Alex saying that we should wait for the outcome of the report. That's absolutely right.
Well, we shouldn't have to, but we obviously haven't got much choice.
Why shouldn't we have to? Everybody's got a right.
No, but the Prime Minister should be able to tell us whether he did or didn't attend a party. He shouldn't have to have the police say whether he did or not. He was there, he either was or wasn't, and he presumably knows whether he was.
He says he didn't, and let's see what the report says.
Is there a question, though, here, for the police themselves? I mean, they investigated Keir Starmer's what turned out not to be rule-breaking pretty quickly and on the quiet. And yet it almost seems it took Sue Gray to carry out her own investigation to get enough material for the police to investigate.
Yeah, I mean
it should be the job of civil servants or indeed anyone to start doing the work of the police.
Well, I agree. But there is this line, isn't there? I mean, number 10 is not like a terraced house with a few people in it. It is a huge office building. I mean, in that kind of workplace, it's not uncommon, I think, for people to have a birthday cake or to have a glass of wine after work. It's not uncommon. I'm not saying everything was right or it should have happened like this, or and I think the Prime Minister's acknowledged and apologised for some of the things that have happened in there. There's a cultural problem in there, but I mean, we've got to just make sure we look at the facts properly.
Just on the Jimmy Savile stuff, I think you said you thought his comments on that were inappropriate. I mean, do you think he should apologise, or at least provide that clarification which he did to the media last Thursday in Parliament?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think he should do that. I mean, Alex says we're not political point scoring in PMQs. We're all the time, both sides. It's wrong to say that. But one thing that I thought was also inappropriate, I've got to say, immediately prior to Boris Johnson saying that, Keir Starmer had said that Boris Johnson had damaged everything and everyone he'd come into contact with in his life. I think it's absolutely horrendous thing to say. That hasn't been widely reported. That's his children, that's his colleagues. I mean, this is just awful things to say. This should not be part of political discourse. It should be robust. It should definitely be, there's no quarter.
But maybe focus on the politics and not on the man, which, Lindsay Hoyle, I'm sure, will reiterate again today. But that was a very personal attack on the Prime Minister.
I think it reflected the continued frustration. The Prime Minister simply won't be candid with the truth. And I think people have the right to expect that. And the reality is, he will drag down his party with him, and those MPs that are standing with him will go with their reputations too. And I actually think that's quite sad, because most of them I know don't condone this behaviour. But the reality is, the Prime Minister will cling on. He said this till the end. What did he say? A tank division will have to drag him out. Well, I'm afraid he will bring down everyone around him with him.
Let's move on to this report out today, suggesting from the Public Accounts Committee that UK firms have been hit by increased costs, paperwork and border delays as a result of Brexit. In many ways, actually, this is a really important issue for the country. It's an important issue on, something there's an ongoing process that might need to be perfected. But I suspect Keir Starmer's not going to ask questions on this, is he? Because, that is an open goal for the Prime Minister to remind people that, of course, Keir Starmer tried to, in many regards, have a second referendum on all of this?
Well, I think, I can't say whether Keir will or won't say that, but, there's an awful lot of news around, so you're not going to be able to cover everything. I do think it's a very important point, but we're not going to be able to address that question by looking backwards and relitigating 2016, 2017, 2019. The reality is we need to get around the table with business, understand their concerns, with our neighbouring states as well, and find something that works for everybody. And I know that doesn't play as well at PMQs.
My fundamental point is that one of the big issues is Brexit, and will continue to be, but yet the Labour Party probably feel neutered somewhat in being able to hold the government to account on that.
No, I don't, and I don't think Keir does. But what I'm saying is that I think we need to address the issues of today with regards to Brexit, rather than, as perhaps you were suggesting the Prime Minister would, Darren, addressing the issues of yesterday. I don't see how that moves forward, and improves business, improves the country more generally. So I think it's a reasonable thing to do.
I mean, this is important, isn't it, Kevin? Because, this is one of the points about leaving the EU was to try and get rid of red tape. We heard for decades about EU bureaucracy, and yet it seems to have increased since we've left. That's pretty damning, isn't it?
Listen, if you voted for Brexit, you voted for change. And it's going to hit some sectors harder than others. It's going to hit some parts of the UK harder than others. There are serious issues here. There's no doubt about it.
Let me put it another way. Is in, many people feel that, it's years now since we've left, the change has been slow.
Well, it would be easier if the EU were more cooperative, and there's no doubt about that. They're putting unreasonable barriers in the way of free trade, which is unfortunate and disappointing. What would be better is we work on this together, cross-party, a national endeavour, the UK Parliament against the EU on this. It is a negotiation. We've got to be tough. The more united we are, the less we have recriminations about the past. There is a suspicion, I'm not with Alex, I've got to say, but with some parts of the opposition, and certainly the SNP, want to take us back into the EU, which would be disastrous. So let's move forward. That's the key thing, and do that best if we work together as one Parliament.
Alex?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I also would say that we do need to dial down some of the rhetoric with our neighbours also. They need to be more cooperative, but we also do with them, because the phone works both ways. But as I say, I think we can find a great deal of unanimity on this, because we all want business to trade as effectively as possible, because that's best for all our communities. So, as I say, let's look forward and address the issues of today.
And just very finally, because I suspect we are about to hear from the Prime Minister. In fact, Lindsay Hoyle is on his feet. Calling some of our... But I think maybe let's go over to the Commons. I don't know who is on their feet there. Oh, no, still talking about Westminster. Just very, very briefly, I mean, the cost of living crisis, Keir Starmer could rub some more salt in the wounds, couldn't he, by calling for this national insurance rise not to happen? Because, frankly, there are a lot of your colleagues on the backbenches and elsewhere. Oh, here we go. Let's go to the Prime Minister in the Commons. We'll go back to that.
Saved by the bell.
Intention to return on the first day after the half-term recess to present our strategy for living with COVID. Provided the current encouraging trends in the data continue, it is my expectation that we will be able to end the last domestic restrictions, including the legal requirement to self-isolate if you test positive, a full month early, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Ruth Bacon. Mr. Speaker, the Northern Ireland Protocol has frustrated business, is undermining the Belfast Agreement, and is restricting the free movement of goods and people within our United Kingdom. What action will my right honourable friend, the Minister for the Union, now take to reunite the United Kingdom and uphold the interests of all residents, including those living in Northern Ireland?
Prime Minister. My honourable friend is quite right, because the protocol does not require, contrary to the way it is being applied by our friends, it does not require that all foods and all medicines and all plants should be systematically checked in the way that they are, Mr. Speaker. And we must fix it, and with goodwill and with common sense, I believe we can fix it, Mr. Speaker. But if our friends don't show the requisite common sense, then of course we will trigger Article 60.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Was the Business Secretary right to say that fraud is not something that people experience in their day-to-day lives?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course this government and this country despises those who defraud people, and that's why we crack down on fraudsters, Mr. Speaker, and we've strengthened our anti-fraud task force. We're bringing forward an economic crime bill, Mr. Speaker, but we also attach huge importance to tackling neighbourhood crime and crimes of violence, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased that those crimes are down 17%, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's answer's got a big hole in it. We've had lockdowns for the last 2 years. 2 crimes that people could commit were online fraud and throwing parties. And so far as I can see, the numbers for both of those have gone through the roof. But I was asking the Prime Minister about the 14,000 cases of fraud a day. Many older people duped out of hard-earned savings. And the Business Secretary casually suggests on TV, don't worry, it's not real crime. There's a crime gang in Manchester, Mr. Speaker, nicking cars and shipping them around the world, all financed by COVID loans from the taxpayer. And what's the Chancellor's response? Write off £4 billion in losses and block an investigation by the National Crime Agency. His cabinet turning a blind eye to scammers. Is it any wonder that his anti-fraud minister realised no one in government seemed to care and threw in the towel?
Prime Minister. No, Mr. Speaker, because what we're doing is tackling crime across the board, and that's why we're investing more in tackling fraud, Mr. Speaker, but we're also tackling the neighbourhood crime that is of such massive psychological damage to people in this country, tackling knife crime, tackling burglary, tackling crimes of violence in the street, Mr. Speaker, with tougher sentences, which they voted against, by the way, Mr. Speaker, and putting more police out on the street, Mr. Speaker. And the reason we're able to afford it, Mr. Speaker, is because we have a strong economy and we're coming back strongly from COVID, and that is thanks to the big calls that this government got right.
Yes, Armour. Mr. Speaker, his anti-fraud minister quit, saying the failure of government to tackle fraud was so egregious that he had to, and this is his words, smash some crockery to get people to take notice. Well, it seems that the Prime Minister hasn't noticed the broken plates and the shattered glass all around him. It's almost as if he's been completely distracted for weeks. Talking of scams, households are going to have to fork out an extra £19 billion on their energy bills. The government is insulting people's intelligence by pretending it's giving them a discount. But it's not. It's a con. A buy now, pay later scheme, a dodgy loan, not a proper plan. Mr. Speaker, he shakes his head. So let me put this in language you might understand. When his donors give him cash to fund his lifestyle and tell him he has to pay it all back later, are they giving him a loan or a discount?
Mr. Speaker, our plan to tackle the cost of living is faster, more efficient and more generous than anything that they have set out, Mr. Speaker. We've lifted the living wage by record amounts. We've cut the effective tax for people on universal credit, Mr. Speaker, and we're now setting out a fantastic plan to help people with the cost of energy, Mr. Speaker. And it is more generous and more effective than anything Labour have set out. And the only reason we can do it's £9.1 billion, Mr. Speaker. It's huge sums that we're using to help people across the country. And the only reason we can afford it, Mr. Speaker, is because we have a strong economy, the fastest growing in the G7, as I think I may have pointed out to the right honourable gentleman last week, and not just last year, but this year as well.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister clearly hasn't got the first clue what the Chancellor signed him up to. So let me help him out. His plan is to hand billions of pounds of taxpayers' cash to energy companies and then force families to pay it off in instalments for years to come. If it sounds like he's forcing people to take out a loan, and it looks like he's forcing people to take out a loan, isn't it just forcing people to take out a loan?
We are giving people in Band D council tax, A to D council tax valuations across the country. That is 27 million homes. We're giving them the equivalent of £150 rebate off their council tax. Their offer is for £89, Mr. Speaker. Ours is faster, more generous, and more effective. And what they would do. And you know, this is a global problem, Mr. Speaker, caused by the spike in gas prices. But what they would do is clobber the oil and gas companies right now with a tax that would deter investment in gas just when this country needs gas, Mr. Speaker, as we transition to green fuel. It would be totally ridiculous, and it would raise prices for consumers.
Mr. Speaker, I was always worried that the Prime Minister wasn't one for reading terms and conditions, didn't understand what the Chancellor signed him up to, and he's just confirmed my worst fears. There is an alternative.
Order. Can I just say, if you want to carry on outside. I am not having this perpetual noise coming from the front bench. Secretary of State should know better, and I expect better, and I certainly don't need to put up with it anymore. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, there is an alternative. He could stand up to his Chancellor, tell him to support families rather than loading them with debt. Tell him to look at those bumper profits of oil and gas giants. Shell's profits up £14 billion this year. BP's profits up £9.5 billion this year. Mr. Speaker, every second of the day, they've made £750 extra profit from rising prices. At the same time, households are facing an extra £700 a year on their bills. Why on earth is this government forcing loans on British families when they should be asking those with an unexpected windfall to pay a little more to keep household bills down?
Mr. Speaker, the Labour plan would clobber supplies. It's an improvement on what I thought he stood for, which was nationalising the energy companies. Maybe he's dropped that one now. I can't tell whether he's dropped that one or not. But, Mr. Speaker, what he would be doing, maybe he has, what he would be doing, Mr. Speaker, is hitting the energy companies at precisely the moment when we need to encourage them to go for more gas, Mr. Speaker, because we need to transition now to cleaner fuels. And what this government is providing is £9.1 billion worth of support. It's more generous than anything Labour is offering. And I just repeat my point. The only reason we can do it is because we kept our economy moving in those hard times when they took the wrong decisions. And we came out of lockdown in July, Mr. Speaker, when he opposed it last year. And we kept going over Christmas and New Year when they opposed it, Mr. Speaker. And that's why we have the fastest growing economy in the G7, not just last year, but this year as well, as I never tire of saying.
He can bluff and bluster all he likes. The reality is this. On top of the Tory tax rises, on top of the soaring prices, the loan shark Chancellor and his unwitting sidekick have now kicked up a buy now, pay later scheme. It leaves taxpayers in debt, while oil and gas companies say they've got more money than they know what to do with. It's the same old story with this government. Get in a mess, protect their mates, and ask working people to pick up the bill. But isn't he worried that everyone can now see that with this Prime Minister and this Chancellor, it's all one big scam and people across the country are paying the price?
Mr. Speaker, what they can see is a government that is absolutely committed to doing the right thing for the people of this country and taking the tough decisions when Labour is calling for us to take the easy way out and spend more taxpayers' money. And, Mr. Speaker, it was this government that decided to keep going in July when he wanted to stay in lockdown. We kept going over Christmas and New Year. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, it occurs to me that we also were able to use those Brexit freedoms to deliver the fastest booster round and the fastest vaccine round. Yes, Mr. Speaker, when he not only voted 48 times to go back into the EU, yes he did, but he also voted to stay in the European Medicines Agency, Mr. Speaker. And our plan for jobs is working, Mr. Speaker. up. We have record low youth unemployment. Our plan for the NHS and care is working, Mr. Speaker. They have no plan at all, Mr. Speaker. Our plan for the country is working. We have a great vision, Mr. Speaker, to unite and level up across our country. They have no plan whatever, Mr. Speaker. And I say to him, plan beats no plan. We have a great plan for our country. They play politics.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's £9 billion support to help with rising energy bills is most welcome. But will the Prime Minister assure the people of Anglesey and beyond that it's full steam ahead for new nuclear like Wilbur knoweth, and that this government is moving at pace on the Future Nuclear Enabling Fund so that the UK has energy security, jobs and investment right here on these shores?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I think I was only last week that I was congratulating her, or maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, on her fantastic advocacy for nuclear in Ismon. And don't forget, Mr. Speaker, that Labour allowed nuclear capacity to decline by 11% on their watch. I don't think maybe you've forgotten that, Mr. Speaker. We want to get back up there, and that's why there will be at least one big nuclear project this Parliament, at least one, and our nuclear financing bill will support that objective.
Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure you and the entire House will want to join me in welcoming the Remembering Srebrenica campaign that launched their yearly events in Parliament last night, and we all must continue to strive for ongoing peace in Bosnia. Mr. Speaker, the flurry of changes in Downing Street over the last few days is a sight to behold. It's amazing how much energy this Prime Minister can sum up when it comes to saving his own skin. But whilst he's been busy rearranging the deck chairs, in the real world, people continue to be punished by the Tory cost of living crisis. Yesterday, Open Democracy found that as a direct result of the Chancellor's national insurance hike, nurses will, on average, take a £275 a year pay cut in April. That pay cut will hit at the very same moment that soaring energy bills land, bills that have shot up £1,000 in the space of a year. It is a bill they and the rest of the public simply can't afford. So rather than the Prime Minister and the Chancellor scrapping over the Tory leadership, will they do something useful and scrap their regressive hike in national insurance?
Mr. Speaker, actually, it was interesting that the gentleman opposite didn't mention that, because I think everybody can see how vital this is. We have to clear our COVID backlogs, Mr. Speaker. We have 6 million people already on the waiting list. I'm afraid that will go up. And we need to be recruiting the staff now. That's why we're recruiting 50,000 more nurses. There are 11,000 more this year than there were last year. And to his point, Mr. Speaker, we've increased the starting salary for nurses by 12.8%, in addition to the bursaries and other help that we give them. We value our nurses, we love our NHS, and we're paying for it.
Ian Blackford. Well, actions speak louder than words, Mr. Speaker, and if he wants to reward the nurses, then he needs to pay them. They are the very backbone of the National Health Service, the very people that he's hitting with the pay cut in April. And I shouldn't have to remind the Prime Minister that at the same time that those nurses were going into work every day to fight a pandemic, 16 different parties were happening in his government. The public know what nurses sacrificed during the pandemic, and they know exactly what this rule-breaking Prime Minister and his government were up to. So are the Prime Minister and his Chancellor seriously telling those nurses that the reward for seeing us through the pandemic is a £270 wage cut?
Mr. Speaker, what we're telling the people of this country now, what fantastic nurses is, we back them all the way. And what they want is more nurses, Mr. Speaker. That's why there are record numbers in training. That's why we have 11,000 more in the NHS now this year than there were last year, Mr. Speaker. And those, I think, are fantastic investments in our country and our society. And I must say that I think it's peculiar that, as I understand it, the Scottish Nationalist Party's approach to healthcare is now to cut off the bottom of doors in schools in Scotland in order to improve ventilation.
Jane Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a proud Walfrenian, I am thrilled that my city is front and centre of the government's levelling up white paper. Getting job seekers of all ages the skills they need to get into work will be vital to levelling up in Wolverhampton, and City of Wolverhampton College is already doing this at their brand new facility at Bentley Bridge in my constituency. Will the Prime Minister join me in congratulating the college, and also will he meet with me and my honourable neighbour and friend, preferably at Wolverhampton College, so we can discuss how more job seekers can get access to skills, and potentially through the City Learning Quarter and that final bit of funding that we need.
I congratulate my honourable friend from Wolverhampton. She is truly a modern-day Lady Wolfruna, Mr. Speaker, and she's completely right that Wolverhampton and the Black Country were at the heart of the first industrial revolution, and they're at the heart of the current 21st century green industrial revolution. And I'm very glad that since April 2020 we've seen 125,000 starts to sector-based work academy programme, partly at least thanks to her lobbying and her support, and wild horses, Mr. Speaker, won't keep me away from Wolverhampton.
Speaker, 74-year-old Janet had £25,000 stolen by fraudsters. She told the BBC, "The money was my mum and dad's. I felt I'd let them down." For Janet, and for the 4 million people who fell victim to fraudsters and online scammers last year, fraud is a crime. So does the Prime Minister understand the hurt he and his ministers cause fraud victims like Janet when they write them out of the crime figures and dismiss fraud as something people don't experience in their day-to-day lives? Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister correct the record on crime figures and apologise?
Mr. Speaker, I direct the House, direct you, Mr. Speaker, to what I've already said to my honourable friend, the member for Hartlepool, but he knows very, very well that this government hates fraud. It hates online fraud. We're tackling the scammers by helping people to come forward when they get an email, when they get duped. Of course, we're helping them in any way that we can, Mr. Speaker, but we are also cutting the crime that affects people up and down our country, the neighbourhood crime, dealing with the county lines drugs gangs, Mr. Speaker, and that, I think, is something he should support as well. And I'm proud that those numbers have come down by 17%.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's wonderful news that the first in-person Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting for 4 years will take place during Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee. Can the Prime Minister ensure that the global learning crisis is high on their agenda? And will he ask his amazing diplomats to ensure that every leader in the Commonwealth signs up to the Kenyatta Declaration on education?
I thank her very much, thank my right honourable friend very much, everything she does to support education for girls. I think 12 years of quality education for every girl in the world is probably the single most transformative thing we could do to improve the world. And I remember working with my friend Uhuru Kenyatta on the declaration, and we will certainly ensure that everybody at the Commonwealth signs up to it.
Eben Hamilton. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at the height of the lockdown restrictions in 2020, my constituent, who's worked for the NHS for over 30 years, was diagnosed with a tumour on her spine. Whilst in hospital undergoing painful surgery, her family obeyed the rules and didn't visit her. Mr. Speaker, in the last few minutes, a photo has emerged of the Prime Minister in Downing Street on the 15th of December 2020, surrounded by alcohol, food and people wearing tinsel. It looks a lot like one of the Christmas parties he told us never happened. So for the sake of my constituent and the sacrifices she made, will the Prime Minister be referring this party to the police, as it's not one of the ones already being investigated? Prime Minister.
I'm afraid, first of all, I'm very sorry about his constituent and for the difficulties that she's been through, and I understand very much her feelings, Mr. Speaker. But in what he has just said, I'm afraid he is completely in error.
Marco Longi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 30th of September 2020, the Prime Minister joined me on a building site in Dudley on what is now the new Institute of Technology, delivering on skills for future jobs and creating opportunities across the Black Country. Will he join me in congratulating the delivery team who delivered on this amazing project, including stakeholders like Thomas Dudley and Dudley College, and will he actually come and join me in person in doing so at the nearest opportunity?
Minister. Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend. He is a great champion for Dudley and for the Black Country, Mr. Speaker, and I'm delighted to hear that the Black Country and Marches Institute of Technology is now open, and I will certainly keep his kind invitation in mind.
Ian Paisley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, the film Belfast contains the immortal words, "If you're not listening, you probably don't understand us. And if you don't understand us, you're probably not listening." The fact of the matter is that the protocol has zero support from unionists. The fact of the matter is, and I hope the Prime Minister is listening to this, that in a divided society, a solution that only attracts the support of one section of that community will never stand. Will the Prime Minister therefore take the opportunity to speak to the Irish Government, whose Ambassador Daniel Mulhern is running around Washington, demanding demanding further implementation of the protocol on the basis that it will bring further checks upon the people of Northern Ireland? Does the Prime Minister accept that he has now the responsibility to bring forward a solution that unites the people of Northern Ireland and bring forward a solution that saves the union that has been undermined by it?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Well, I agree with him completely that there must be a solution that commands cross-community support. And at the moment, Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that the balance of the Good Friday Agreement is being upset by the way the protocol is being operated. And we need to fix it, Mr. Speaker. And that's what we're going to do. And if our friends won't agree, then of course we will, as I said earlier on, of course we will implement Article 16.
Geoffrey Clifton-Brown. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rather than a compulsory windfall tax so favoured by the opposition, would my right honourable friend take an alternative view, summon a high-level meeting with the oil and gas companies with the aim of a voluntary agreement to bring more oil and gas onto the wholesale market to reduce oil and gas prices to help hard-pressed people deal with the cost of living problems?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank my right honourable friend very much for that suggestion, which I think is an interesting one and an ingenious one. The oil and gas companies create hundreds of thousands of jobs in the UK, and they're very, very important to our economy. I will do what I can to take forward his request for a meeting with them. But I just remind the House that we've frozen fuel duty, Mr. Speaker, 12 years in a row, saving people £15 in their cost of filling up their tanks compared to 2010.
Ruth Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand the Prime Minister has been heard singing "I Will Survive" in recent days. I would suggest that he would be better off singing "Careless Whisper" instead, because, Mr. Speaker, in 2017, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe was condemned to an extended prison sentence in Iran because of the careless words of this Prime Minister. Now, in 2022, this week, my friend, the Leader of the Opposition, was hounded by thugs outside this Parliament because of the careless, disgraceful words of this Prime Minister. So will the Prime Minister do the decent thing? Will he reconsider his words, repent and resign?
Mr. Speaker, I don't think that she should either let the thugs and yobs who bullied and harassed the right honourable gentleman off the hook any more, because they are culpable, any more than she should let the Iranian government off the hook, Mr. Speaker, because they are culpable.
Holford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Since 2017, referrals for children's mental health has gone up by 60%. Eating disorders amongst young girls have gone up by 400% since lockdown. And we know that social media companies play a huge part in this. Given that social media platforms like TikTok are providing crack for kids in terms of adult content, negative imagery, and addictive algorithms, will my right honourable friend consider implementing a 2% levy on social media companies which would raise £100 million to fund mental health resilience programmes for children.
Mr. Speaker, I know my right honourable friend has campaigned on this issue assiduously, and he's quite right about the psychological damage that social media can do, and I've heard what he's had to say recently about TikTok. We will see what we can do to address all these issues in the forthcoming online harms bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bradford is UK's youngest city and has the 10th largest city economy with a GDP of 11.6 billion and is bidding to be the capital of culture. Now it comes out that no detailed analysis of the long-term economic benefits of investing in Bradford and the North through the integrated rail plan was carried out. This government failure has robbed Bradford of £30 billion worth of growth over the next 10 years. When is the Prime Minister going to match action to rhetoric and on levelling up and give Bradford the investment it deserves?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid that she's wrong in what she says, because we're not only investing massively in Yorkshire, investing in police in Yorkshire, 640 more police, investing in education, but she's misunderstood what we said at the time of the £96 billion integrated rail plan. Because what we are saying is that we will look at ways in which we can ensure that we protract the eastern leg of high-speed rail from north of Birmingham on the eastern leg to Bradford. What we're not doing is coming up with a scheme before we've decided exactly what to do and how to fund it. But we are not ruling it out, Mr. Speaker.
Stuart Anderson.
Mr. Speaker, I serve my country with pride in the Royal Green Jackets. I will always be a rifleman and a veteran, and I welcome the veteran strategy the Prime Minister's just brought out. But I ask the Prime Minister if veterans will always be at the heart of this government strategy and everything can be done to see they always get what they need and are honoured.
Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, that's why we set up an office for veterans. That's why we've ensured that veterans get preferential treatment on public transport. One of the first things I did when I became Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, and it's why we make sure that veterans receive particular support and encouragement in employment. And we encourage employers to take on veterans as well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the panicked Downing Street staffing reshuffle at the weekend, the Prime Minister appointed to a senior role a man who recently lobbied the government on behalf of Huawei Technologies, a hostile state vendor that this House legislated to exclude entirely from our country's 5G networks. Given the number 10 Director of Communications has, by definition, access to some of the most sensitive government information, can the Prime Minister tell the House whether Mr Harry's present role requires enhanced developed vetting and strap clearance, and whether he has gone through the necessary checks to provide for that level of clearance before he took up his post?
Minister.
A curious question to come from the benches that contain someone who took, I think, £586,000 from the Chinese government to support his office. But, Mr. Speaker, what I can tell him is that this government took the brave and necessary step of making sure that we excluded Huawei from our critical national infrastructure, and that, Mr. Speaker, was the right thing to do, whatever he's saying.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Prime Minister a question about Sue Gray's report? I asked him, well, colleagues may groan, I'm only asking this question because I asked the Prime Minister last week and I didn't get a straight answer. It's important because it's about those who make the law obeying the law. The Prime Minister wants to be judged on the facts, and that's right. So can I ask him to commit at the dispatch box that upon conclusion of the Metropolitan Police investigation, will he ensure that Sue Gray's final report is published immediately and in full?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with great respect to my right honourable friend, I do believe I answered that last Monday, but or whenever it was, possibly last Wednesday as well. But I'll repeat for the benefit of the House that as soon as all the inquiries are concluded, I will immediately publish in full whatever Sue Gray gives me.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I understand that the UK government signed an agreement with the Iranian authorities last summer that would have resulted in the payment of the £400 million that we owe Iran and the release of my constituent, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. That agreement fell through and the debt still hasn't been paid. Mr. Speaker, this case urgently needs the Prime Minister's attention and personal intervention. So could I ask the Prime Minister, will he meet personally with me and with Richard Ratcliffe? I don't want to meet his colleagues. I want to meet with him personally to find out why the agreement fell through and why Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe still isn't home after 6 long years.
I thank her very much. I thank her also, by the way, for all the hard work she does on behalf of Nazanin. We remain committed to securing the release of Nazanin and all the very difficult consular cases that we have in Iran. As she knows, the IMS debt is difficult to settle and to square away for all sorts of reasons to do with sanctions. But we will continue to work on it, and I will certainly make sure that we have another meeting with Richard Ratcliffe in due course.
Natalie Alford.
Mr. Speaker, Dover is once again beset by miles of traffic jams along the motorways, affecting residents and local businesses alike. Not because of Brexit, but because of Brussels bureaucracy and red tape. Will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, meet with me to discuss how we can invest in our local roads, in the M2, in the M20 and the Dover Tap to unclog that road once and for all, and also to get rid of the unnecessary red tape for a trading global Britain?
Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, she's absolutely right in what she says. As the economy rebounds, we're seeing all sorts of pressures, but we do need to make sure that we clear bottlenecks everywhere in our system, and that's what we'll do.
Gerald Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to refer to the Prime Minister's answer to my honourable friend member for Leeds North East. The photograph referred to is all over social media. Everybody can see the photo. The Prime Minister is in the photo. So can I ask him again, will he refer to the matter to the police? Because this is not one of the parties already being investigated by the Metropolitan Police.
Prime Minister. That's precisely the point, Mr. Speaker. It already has been. That event already has been submitted for investigation.
That ends Prime Minister's questions. I'll let people leave before we start the UQ. All right. Yeah. No, there's nothing. All the best statements.
OK, well, there we go. That was Prime Minister's question time inside the Commons. An awful lot to get through, actually. In many ways, 2 very significant moments. The first at the very top, in which the Prime Minister said that he is going to come back after the Commons recess and announce that domestic restrictions around COVID are likely to be lifted probably at the end of this month, a month earlier than had been expected. That includes things like self-isolation. That is a very, very significant announcement that we hadn't been expecting. And as you can see at the ticker tape at the bottom of your screen, the other thing was that Labour MP Fabian Hamilton asking the Prime Minister about a new picture that's been published by the Daily Mirror newspaper that shows the Prime Minister at a Christmas quiz that we had known about, had happened before, not been investigated by the police. But it does picture the Prime Minister next to a bottle of champagne. And additionally, Dominic Cummings, you may well have heard of him, has also said that there are lots more pictures floating around. We'll be getting reaction to all that and a hell of a lot more in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned. We'll be back in 2.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs, sometimes big hair. This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to the briefing here on GB News. 38 minutes past 12 o'clock. We're on TV, online, of course, on your DAB digital radio. We've just heard from Prime Minister's Question Time in the Commons. A pretty packed session, lots going on. So let's go for some post-match analysis now with our fantastic panel. We've got Kevin Hollinrake, who's the Conservative MP for Thirst and Bolton, and Alex Norris, who's the Shadow Minister for Levelling Up, and also the Labour MP for Nottingham North. Thank you, gentlemen, for sticking around. Kevin, let's start first of all with that announcement at the very top of Prime Minister's Question Time. Actually not, I don't think in response to a question, but the Prime Minister saying that they are going to lift domestic restrictions a month earlier than had been planned. Is that welcome news?
That's fantastic. I mean, that will be the 24th of February, so later this month, hopefully all restrictions ended, no requirement to self-isolate anymore. And I think it does show, and I think Prime Minister highlighted it, that on the big calls in terms of COVID, the Prime Minister's got it right. And this is somebody who was obviously very seriously ill through COVID, but nevertheless, on vaccines, on lockdowns, on the rules in terms of isolation, I think he's got this absolutely right. And we're the most open economy in the world right now.
Is there not a concern, though, that, we're still seeing 60, 70,000 cases a day, and that's with self-isolation? I'm sure, I don't know, we'll get reaction, of course, when we do. I mean, is there any concern at all that this might be a little too soon?
Well, I think we're moving away from cases being the key metric. The key metric is hospitalisations and serious illness and, sadly, deaths. But other countries are doing the same. I think Sweden's just ending its testing programme, for example, because of similar trends. So I think it looks like we're over the worst of this, which will be fantastic news for everybody, not least the economy and our freedoms that we sometimes take for granted.
Alex?
Well, I think it would be very welcome news. We will, of course, want to see the detail and we'll want to see the basis, the data that's based on. But I think people will be sitting at home watching this will be very glad. I mean, I do want to address the point the Prime Minister said about restrictions over Christmas and that, it was his restrictions that were effective and whatnot. Viewers should remember that those restrictions happened because of Labour Party votes, not Conservative Party votes. There's significant Conservative Party rebellions against that. So if we want to talk about getting the big calls right, well, those restrictions were good. That was a big call we got right.
But the Prime Minister is also right in suggesting the Labour Party were not in favour of the opening up in July, and that the Labour Party, essentially, while not maybe explicitly saying, we're suggesting that the Prime Minister wasn't being cautious enough over Christmas, which again, in the end, actually, it turned out that the Prime Minister had made the right
No,
call.
Darren, I've got to take exception to that. Wes Streeting, our Shadow Health Secretary, got absolute pelters for not saying go further over the Christmas restrictions. He didn't. That was the right call. As I say, it's a call we made. With regards to July, what we were saying then was that we thought that mask wearing should continue. We thought that people should work from home when they could. And frankly, I think that was the right thing. That would have dampened down still at that point. So the idea that meant that the nation would have been shut
I'm not entirely sure that's true, because actually I don't think rates are very different in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland compared to England, which kept in many of those restrictions that you suggest.
Well, as we say, I think it would have had a positive impact. The Prime Minister wants to characterise it as some way that we wanted to keep the nation shuttered, but as with so much the Prime Minister says, it's more bluff and bluster than it is grounded in truth. So, I think that needed clearing up.
Let's go on what Sir Keir Starmer talked about, Kevin, very much based around the cost of living, higher energy bills. I mean, Keir Starmer is right in the sense that this is not kind of free money. People will have to pay off this this kind of 200 quid or whatever it is when it comes to tackling fuel bills in the years to come.
Yeah. I mean, just on the facts, West Street's been called time and time again for more restrictions, and then welcome the fact there weren't any restrictions brought in. Anyway, let's move on to cost of living. Hugely big issue. It's happening. It's a global issue. Inflation, cost of living, particularly energy prices. So this is £350 for the average household, which will be very welcome. It'll halve the extra cost of energy this year, which it has to be welcomed.
Yeah, not until much later this year, though.
It's all taxpayers. Well, some of it kicks in straight away in April, £150. The £200 comes in just when bills are getting more expensive. So it's £350 this year. So it makes sense to phase that in. The cutting VAT that Labour wanted to bring in was completely debunked by economists. Our Treasury Select Committee, 3 economists said that was the wrong thing to do. It would only save the average household £90. This is £350. Now, it's true that £200 is a loan. It's a smoothing out because we hope to see energy prices fall over the next few years. But let's remember, this is taxpayers' money. This is not, the government has no money. So if the opposition is saying, oh my God, the government should pay for all this, that's £9 billion. Net of that, net of the loan, it's £3.5 billion still. It's a huge amount of money. You can't just keep spending like there's no end. You've got to draw a line somewhere, whether it's healthcare, whether it's energy prices. There's only so much money to go around. Otherwise, we get deep into debt.
Alex?
But that isn't what we've said. We haven't said just put it on the taxpayer. We've said quite the opposite. You know, what we saw from Boris Johnson was an incredible, full-throated defence of big companies that have made extraordinary profits out of rising commodity prices. I wish we saw him defend the viewers watching today and the ordinary family in my constituency. The reality is these firms have made unprecedented profits, which they did not expect. It would not have any impact on jobs or investment to say to them they're going to have to share some of the proceeds of that from those who are losing out from rising commodity prices, which are people in this country. So it isn't asking the taxpayer to pay for it. It's asking for a windfall tax. And it's not, as Kevin characterises it, just the VAT cut, though that would be part of it. It's also extending the Warm Homes discount to more families and making it more generous. So in the end, you know, Kevin could talk about 350 quid. He knows the majority of that has to be paid back. It's a buy now, pay later con. You know, we can do much, much better and without saddling the taxpayer for years to come. I'm surprised you don't go for it, Kevin. I think you should.
I've got some sympathy with a windfall tax. But in terms of what you're opposing, and I was on there today, national insurance rise, that's $12 billion a year. You're going to add to our debt, $12 billion a year. The VAT is $2.5 billion, so that's £40.5 billion a year you're going to spend without letting it back in from the taxpayers. Where are you going to get the money from? Well, nobody understands it, Alex.
Well, no, I'm not surprised government benches don't understand it because they're same old answers.
The public don't understand it.
Well, I think we've got more sympathy on our proposals than the government have on theirs. What we're saying is you can introduce more money into the system through taxation, in this case a windfall tax. You also could introduce more money into the system by having a better growing economy. And what we've seen is, you know, Prime Minister talks about fastest growth rates. That's because we had the biggest cratering. It's only getting back to where we were, but for a decade we've just had this bumbling anemic growth, and that's what the OBR are forecasting in future years. So
you know, when people pick up the papers and they look at the inordinate amount of money, frankly, that some of these energy firms are making this year, and at the same time people are having to pay hundreds and hundreds of pounds more. It doesn't key, does it? You know, I think one of the chief executives suggested that they've got more money than they know what to do with. I mean, that's how can you square that?
Well, to put this in context, they have lost money in previous years because of the COVID crisis, so a lot of this is catch-up. And we need the oil and gas companies to invest in exploration. We need more supplies, as was asked in the PMQs then. We need more supply and more British gas being produced. But nevertheless, I do have sympathy with these huge profits being made. I think we should look at it. I'm very happy to work cross-party, and I acknowledge the opposition's policies when they get them right. And I think on this, a sensible increase in corporation tax on the big energy producers at this point in time is something we should consider.
OK, let's move on, and do get in touch, of course. GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBNews. Very keen to get to your views, and we'll get to some of them a little later on in the programme about what you made about Prime Minister's question, about what you want to talk about. Let's talk, though, about the other significant moment in PMQs, which came from a Labour MP asking about this picture in the Daily Mirror newspaper. Now, we can't, at the moment, unfortunately, show it to you. We're working on that. But essentially, it seems to relate back to an event that we knew took place inside Downing Street in December 2020, a Zoom quiz. However, this latest picture not only has a member of staff with tinsel around his neck, but also features the Prime Minister and has a bottle of what looks like Prosecco on the table next to some hand sanitizer. Many people, including that Labour MP, suggesting, this was a party. I think you've seen the picture, haven't you, Kevin? This was at the time when the government were saying you're not allowed or you shouldn't be having work parties. I get that this happened at work, but it does very much look like a work party. If someone's got some tinsel around the neck and there's a bottle of Prosecco open on the table, that's a work party now?
What the picture shows is the Prime Minister walking through the door, apparently, to the desk where he's going to be the quizmaster in a Christmas quiz in number 10. People are all socially distanced in that room. There's 3 people in that room that you can see, and the rest of the people were distributed around number 10, which is a big workplace. I don't think, certainly drinking alcohol is not against the rules at work or whatever. So I don't think at this point in time this is a damning photograph.
Would you describe this as a work party? Does it look like a work party?
No, it doesn't. It's not the kind of party I would like to go to.
What does it look like then? If someone's sitting around with tinsel around their neck and they've got a bottle of Prosecco open, now it might not be a party you'd want to go to, but that to me looks like a work party, no?
Most people, as you said, have seen a similar photograph where he sat down as the quizmaster. I don't see really that, even if that's a breach of the guidelines, and let's see what the police say and what Sue Gray says. Even if it is it really commensurate with asking a Prime Minister to resign, particularly at a current crisis? I don't think it is.
Let me follow that up then. The reason I asked that question is because, of course, the Prime Minister's repeatedly said, including in the House of Commons, that as far as he was aware, there were no parties and all the guidance was followed. He said at one stage he was angry to learn about such parties. Now, if I walked into this room, which you seem to be suggesting, and I saw people at a desk with tinsel around their neck and bottles of Prosecco open at a time in which people were told not to have work parties, how can the Prime Minister say that he was unaware that this was happening inside Downing Street?
Well, let's look at the report. We need to see it in the full context. Of course, we can make a judgment now, and Alex will make a judgment now, and we can get the media all surrounding this. But I think we need to see the full context of the report. Under the Met investigation, we can make a decision from there. Clearly, if the Prime Minister has misled Parliament, deliberately misled Parliament, that is a very serious issue and would require the resignation of a minister, including a Prime Minister. But I go back to the other point. There has to be, in my view, to require the resignation of a Prime Minister, particularly at this time, something very significant to require that, rather than having some birthday cake or a glass of wine in your back garden.
Alex?
Yeah, I agree. I think it does have to be something significant. And we have to remember that at that point, in December 2020, we were asking people to cancel weddings. We were asking them to attend funerals of loved ones online. We were asking them to not meet newly born grandchildren. And who had asked them to do that? The Prime Minister. And at that time, they were just living up and having their parties. That's why it's so serious. And I will stand by that. It's not a party political thing. That's really, really important. And the reality is, we really got to the point in this process where we now have to say that you sat next to an open bottle of booze with a geezer next to you wearing tinsel, and you're going to somehow say that's not a party, having told Parliament that parties didn't happen, having told Parliament that you weren't at parties, and then this one, which isn't even in the Sue Gray report, which isn't even in the police report. What more do you need, Kevin, if you won't accept that picture? Then short of a time machine and attending yourself, I worry that Conservative MPs simply will never do the right thing.
I suppose the one other point is, frankly, we're all sat around here and we don't know the circumstances, and that's why Sue Gray's looking into this, and that's why, there's a due process, and maybe why Kevin's right about we need to wait for that due process. In saying that, Dominic Cummings, who may well, and again, we don't know, be behind some of this, has tweeted in the last couple of minutes that there are more photos, including, he says, inside the Downing Street flat. And my point to you, Kevin, is you've come on here, of course, you have to defend your party and your government because that's part of the task. But where does this end? And does it get to a point where, there could be many worse things out there, and that it gets, as critics would suggest, you're defending the indefensible?
Well, I don't defend my party at all costs. I don't have to defend them. I backbench, I can do what I want. I voted against the government last week. And as I just said now, I would support some of the opposition policies against the government's position. So but it's back to the material degree. It has to be significant. This is a huge thing to ask a Prime Minister to step down. So I do think, OK, yeah, it may continue. These photographs might come out, and some people that have got an axe to grind in this are determined to do this, try and get a death by 1,000 cuts. But I think, again, the people I meet who don't really have a politically involved, are far more laid back about this, in my experience, in my constituency, than the media is and the opposition is. And that's got to say something, particularly about the seriousness of asking a Prime Minister to step down.
And it's also, Alex, this point that, people have made up their minds about this now. It's gone to the point where, frankly, if you don't believe the Prime Minister, you don't believe the Prime Minister. And actually, even if you don't necessarily believe the Prime Minister, but you don't think this is a resigning matter, your mind is set that, banging on about this is not going to go anywhere. We need to wait for the reports. And Labour do need to focus on other things.
Well, I think you've seen from Keir Starmer today, he did focus on other things, very important things. Nevertheless, this won't go away because the Prime Minister won't address it. And the idea that people have made their minds up, therefore that's not enough. Well, actually, all you're doing, as usual, the Prime Minister pulls down everything around him with him. You're basically saying that Prime Ministers coming to Parliament, saying things that then later may not be true, doesn't matter anymore. I really strongly think that does matter. I think Kevin does too. I think actually the vast majority of parliamentarians do. But as usual, Boris Johnson's dragging us into the politics of the lowest common denominator, and I don't think we should let him.
Just very briefly, gentlemen, because we've out of time, looking forward to a recess.
Always. A recess is not holidays. I've got to point out when we work in our constituency, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Alex,
absolutely.
Good to get away from London. Recess.
Yeah, that's true.
Alex and Kevin, thank you so much indeed for your time this afternoon. Lots of you getting in touch. Mark says, how can your Tory guest say the government got the big calls correct, claiming lockdowns work as total rubbish, along with the recent Christmas decibel. Jenny says, sorry, this photo does not show the Prime Minister does show the Prime Minister standing socially distanced, nowhere near the bottle. He is not next to it. The Prime Minister does not have a drink in his hand. The police need to investigate who is undermining their investigation. We do not operate a trial by Twitter in this country, though I come back to the point that others are alluding to the fact there may well be other pictures of the Prime Minister. And Marilyn says only lifting restrictions early as he's desperate to get some good news for a change to deflect from his rubbish administration. Bring it on, Cummings. Release as many pictures as you can. We need to get rid of this Prime Minister fast. Always do get in touch. GB Views at GB News, and we'll have more, of course, on that picture and the consequences for the Prime Minister. Though, of course, we've been here before, haven't we, many times with pictures and counterclaims. I'm sure the Prime Minister, just like Kevin's going to say, we need to wait for Sue Gray's report and that of the Metropolitan Police. OK, you're watching GB News, and we're back at 3 o'clock with the briefing this afternoon. We'll be back, of course, at 12 again tomorrow. Up next, though, it's Liam Halligan, who is on the money. But first, before all that, let's bring you the latest weather on this Wednesday afternoon. And it's getting cold right across the country. Here's the Met Office. I'll see you later.
Hello. Most of us will have a dry day today, but increasingly across Scotland, we're seeing showers turning more and more wintry, and we have a Met Office warning for snow in place across parts of Scotland for later today. One more mild day across the south, but here it will turn colder as this cold front moves through. It is providing quite a bit of cloud, and in places a little bit of patchy rain. But it's further north where the winds are strengthening. We've got the wintry showers coming in, snow over hills, but even down to low levels, some snow flurries possible, moving in on that fairly brisk wind. Patchy rain from that weather front across parts of southern England, South Wales, tending to ease off and push further south. The far southeast, dry and bright, but clouding over here. That's where we could see the top temperatures, 13, maybe 14 degrees. Further north, though, we've already got the colder air. So single figures, feeling colder with the wind, and increasingly we'll see those snow showers coming in across western Scotland, likely to pep up overnight. Several centimetres of snow on some of the higher routes here. Snow down to low levels for a time before at low levels turning more back to rain during Thursday. But ice is an extra hazard also. Patchy rain clearing the south, still pretty mild in the south, but not as mild as recent nights. Frost likely across the north where we have clear skies. And if you get some shelter from the wind. But a blustery, showery day across Scotland to come tomorrow. Those showers still of snow over hills. And again, the likelihood for some disruption. Ice is a potential risk as well, where we've got the showers during Thursday. Mostly dry and bright further south, but not as mild. Temperatures back closer to average single figures. Certainly feeling colder with the strong winds, which will be blowing for most of the day across Scotland before easing through the evening. Then, generally, as the winds continue to ease and we have clearer skies, it's going to turn cold on Thursday night with a fairly widespread frost. But that should lead into a sparkling day of sunshine for many on Friday before we see spells of wet and increasingly windy weather sweep across the country this weekend.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a